Before Samson ever drew a breath, heaven already had a plan for his life. The angel of the Lord appeared to a barren woman and told her she would conceive a son, not just any son, but one who would begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines. But this child would require a special vow, a Nazarite vow from the womb. Now, see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor. Judges chapter 13, verse 4 through 5. It wasn't just a promise, it was a responsibility. So her husband, Manoah, hearing this, didn't doubt the message, but he did something wise. He prayed and asked God to send the angel back so they would know how to raise the child. Then Manoah prayed to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I beg you to let the man of God you sent to us come again to teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born." Judges chapter 13, verse 8. And God heard him. The angel returned. They offered a sacrifice, and as the flames rose, the angel of the Lord ascended into heaven through the fire. This wasn't just a birth announcement. This was a divine commissioning. Hidden gold. So many of us pray for blessings, for breakthrough, for favor. But when it finally comes, we realize we don't know how to handle it. That's what makes Manoah's prayer so powerful. He didn't say, "God, are you sure?" He said, "God, teach me how." Sometimes the blessing comes before the instruction, and it's our job to ask God for the wisdom to steward it. Whether it's a new child, a new calling, a new season, or a new opportunity, God doesn't just give gifts, He gives guidance if we ask. From the very beginning, Samson's life was marked by something unexplainable. Scripture says, the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Gehenna. Judges chapter 13, verse 25. But that stirring wasn't for show, it was for purpose. On his way to choose a wife, Samson was attacked by a young lion. No one else was around. There was no sword in his hand, no help coming. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. Judges chapter 14, verse 6. He said nothing to his parents, he just kept walking. But later, Samson came back and found bees and honey in the lion's carcass, and he ate from it. This might seem like a small thing, but for someone under a Nazarite vow like Samson, this was a serious breach. He wasn't supposed to touch anything dead, let alone eat from it. That moment, Samson reached into the lion. He crossed a boundary God had drawn. He found something sweet inside, something dead, and that was the pattern of his downfall. Taking what looked good on the outside, ignoring God's boundaries, violating his consecration quietly. God still used him, but this moment was a warning. It was prophetic, of what was coming, something dead and dangerous would soon look sweet again, Delilah. And the next time it wouldn't be a lion, it would be his life. Samson chooses a Philistine woman as his wife, a choice that shocked his family. But what looked like rebellion was actually God's hidden plan. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. Judges chapter 14, verse 4. This wasn't about romance. It was a setup for war. God was going to use Samson's personal life to stir up and confront Israel's enemies. At the wedding feast, Samson gave the Philistines a riddle, one that only he could answer, because it came from the secret encounter with the lion. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. Judges chapter 14, verse 14. But when they couldn't figure it out, they turned to his wife, not with curiosity, but with cruelty. Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Judges chapter 14, verse 15. So she begged day after day, and eventually he caved. She told them the answers, and the Philistines solved the riddle. Samson knew exactly what happened. If you have not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Judges chapter 14, verse 18. Angry and betrayed, Samson went to Ashkelon, killed 30 men, and gave their clothing as the prize. Then he left the feast in fury. But while he was gone, his wife was given away to someone else. The betrayal wasn't over, it was just the beginning. Hidden gold. This wasn't just nagging. It was manipulation driven by fear. People who aren't rooted in God will always buckle under pressure and pull you down with them. Samson shared a divine secret with someone who wasn't spiritually safe. Be careful who you open up to. When you're carrying an anointing, the wrong person can become a weapon in the enemy's hand. God still used Samson, but this was the beginning of a pattern. Private compromise, public reaction, divine confrontation. Then and now, the Philistines threatened the woman Samson loved, and she betrayed him out of fear. Now, the enemy still uses threats, rejection, isolation, fear of loss to pressure people into selling out truth. Not everyone betrays you because they hate you. Some do it because they fear someone more than they fear God. Then, Samson told his secrets to the wrong person. Now, we often hand over our deepest struggles and spiritual callings to people not equipped to carry them. And when they mishandle it, we act surprised. Then, God used betrayal to trigger a confrontation with the enemy. Now, sometimes your deepest heartbreak is the beginning of your spiritual breakthrough. If you keep returning to what God called you to walk away from, you keep losing what He called you to protect. Samson returned to visit his wife, only to discover she had been given away. His heart snapped in anger, so he caught 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail, lit torches between them, and released them through the Philistine fields. The harvest, the vineyards, the olive groves, everything burned. This wasn't just revenge, it was a declaration. If you try to ruin my life, now I'll ruin your kingdom. The Philistines retaliated by burning his wife and her father alive. The same threat that once caused her betrayal. And with that, Samson struck them down in rage. But then he went and hid in a cave. The Philistines came looking for him, and Judah handed Samson over to keep the peace. But as they tied him up and brought him into the Philistine camp, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. The ropes burned off like flax. He grabbed the jawbone of a donkey and killed 1,000 men with it. Imagine that. God didn't give him a sword or an army, just a broken bone and the power of the Spirit. After the battle, Samson was exhausted, and for the first time he cried out to God. You gave your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst? Judges chapter 15 verse 18. And God, rich in mercy, split the ground and poured out water. Even in his rage, his impulses, his pride, God still answered. Hidden gold. Samson's strength wasn't the problem. It was his surrender to the wrong people. He kept giving his body to enemies, his voice to manipulators, and his will to fearful friends. His willingness to please Judah was a pattern that later escalated with Delilah. If you don't break the need to be accepted now, it will eventually lead you into captivity. Samson fought his enemies, but he never fought his impulses, and it was starting to catch up to him. God empowered him to win, but Samson never asked God to lead. That's a dangerous place, anointed but unsurrendered. Even after victory, Samson felt alone and empty. You can win the battle and still be spiritually dry. Then and now. Samson didn't resist when Judah came to bind him, even though God had called him to deliver them. Instead of standing in his calling, he bent to their pressure. Judges chapter 15 verse 12. We have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. Samson said, swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves. He didn't argue. He didn't pray. He just accepted it. Why? Because he wanted to keep the peace, even if it meant surrendering himself. Now, this is what people pleasing looks like. Silencing your calling to comfort other fears. Tying yourself up so others feel safer. And portraying your assignment just to keep your relationship intact. Sometimes the ropes are spiritual, but the hands that tie them are familiar. Friends, family, even church communities can pressure you to go along with it instead of walking boldly in what God called you to do. Samson was willing to be bound to avoid upsetting Judah. How many of us are bound by silence, bound by fear, are bound by approval addiction when God's been calling us to break free? Then Samson burned down fields with foxes out of revenge. Now we burn bridges, torch opportunities, and destroy relationships when we feel betrayed, and we call it justice. Then Judah tied up Samson to hand him over to the Philistines. Now, sometimes even your own people will betray you when they're scared of the enemy. Then God brought water from dry ground for a man full of pride. Now, God still gives grace to the stubborn, strength to the exhausted, and refreshing to the undeserved. You might be tied up. You might feel alone. You might be fighting with what's in your hand, not what you wanted. But God will still show up in the wilderness to refresh you. Samson's downfall didn't start with Delilah. It started with a pattern he refused to confront. After falling in love with Delilah in the valley of Sorek, the Philistine leaders offered her 1,100 silver coins from each of them to discover the secret to Samson's strength. What followed was eerily familiar. Delilah asked him directly for the secret. He lied. She repeated the question. Each time he told her a false secret, she tested it by yelling, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And sure enough, they were hiding in the room. This wasn't subtle. She literally screamed for the enemy with Samson in the room, and he still stayed. He ignored the most obvious red flags because he had done this before. With his first wife, who wept for 7 days until he gave her the answer to the riddle. With the men of Judah, when they came to bind him and hand him over to the Philistines, and he let them. Samson was a man of strength, but not a man of healed identity. He knew how to win wars, but not how to walk away from cycles. Finally, after being worn down day after day, he gave Delilah the truth, and his strength was tied to his hair, symbol of his vow to God. She soothed him to sleep, shaved his head, and once again shouted, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." This time there was no strength left. God's presence had departed. He was captured, blinded, chained, and forced to grind grain in prison. This was humiliation, not just physically, but spiritually. This man was set apart from birth, became the punchline of his enemies. Then and now. Samson didn't fall because of Delilah. He fell because he never healed what broke him the first time. Delilah wasn't new. She was a recycled test in a different body. And the most dangerous test is the one that feels familiar. Now, when you don't let God address the root, the enemy will keep handing you the same fruit again and again. That friend that's really just a manipulator. That situationship that feels good but drains your soul. That job, that habit, that addiction, that idol that you justify again and again. The need to say yes, even when it costs you peace, time, and purpose and identity. If you won't let God heal it in private, the enemy will expose it in public. And like Samson, you'll wake up thinking you still have strength and it'll be gone. Hidden gold. The Philistines were never Samson's biggest threat. His need for affirmation and his refusal to obey God's boundaries were. He traded obedience for affection, his calling for comfort. Over and over again, he chose to stay tied to people who were trying to tie him up. If you're constantly losing your strength around certain people, places, or habits, it's not a coincidence. It's time to ask, what am I refusing to surrender that's keeping me bound? Delilah was not just a woman. She was a warning that Samson ignored repeatedly. But here's the truth. Your Delilah may not look like a person. It could be anything that lures you away from your strength in God. What could your Delilah be? That relationship that looks good but keeps pulling you out of alignment. That habit you swore you quit but still sneak back into when you're tired or emotional. That platform or title that started with good intention but now feeds your ego more than your purpose. That addiction to validation, to applause, attention, or affection. That need to be needed that makes you say yes even when God said no. That spiritual laziness where you stop praying, stopped obeying, stopped listening. That secret sin you keep excusing because it's not that bad. And just like Delilah, these things don't come with a warning label. But God always sends a whisper, a hesitation, a red flag. Samson had a chance. He could have walked away. But the more you entertain something God said to end, the harder it becomes to let go. And God will allow you to be handed over to your enemies. The scary part. Every time Delilah said, "The Philistines are upon you," they were already hiding in the room. So ask yourself, what are you entertaining in your life that has been training to kill you behind the scenes? But here's the grace. God always provides a warning, a moment of clarity, a tug in your spirit, a verse, a sermon, a moment in prayer. The question isn't, did God warn you? The real question is, were you listening? Have you been ignoring God's red flags because you're addicted to feeling needed? Do you keep returning to the same people, same habits, same compromise, thinking this time it'll be different? God isn't trying to take something from you. He's trying to break the chain that keeps tying you up. Samson once feared by armies and favored by God, now sat blinded, chained, and mocked in a Philistine prison. The man who once tore lions apart with his bare hands was now being led by a boy. The man who once burned fields, crushed enemies, and walked with strength was now humiliated, broken, and forgotten by the very people he once saved. But here's the part most people miss. God never forgot him. Samson's hair began to grow again. It wasn't just a physical detail. It was symbolic of something deeper. His strength was never in the hair. It was in the covenant, the relationship, the God behind the promise. And the moment Samson called out to God again, not with arrogance, but with repentance, God answered. In the temple of Dagon, surrounded by mockers and enemies, Samson asked God for one final chance. Sovereign Lord, remember me, please, God. Strengthen me just once more. Judges chapter 16, verse 28. God did. And in the final act of surrender, Samson brought the pillars down, collapsing the temple and destroying more Philistines in his death than all of his life. Hidden gold. Samson's story didn't end with shame. It ended with redemption. Because failure is never final when you serve a faithful God. You might be bound right now. You might feel like the enemy has taken your vision, your strength, your story. You might feel like you've gone too far, stayed too long, and messed up too big. But God specializes in coming back for people others wrote off. Your greatest act of obedience might still be ahead of you. Then and now. Back then, Samson stood between two pillars, surrounded by enemies, and cried out to God to remember him. Right now, you might be in between your own two pillars, the pain of your past and the fear of your future. What you lost and what you still long for. The chains of your mistakes and the hope that God's not done. But here's the truth. God is not afraid of your prison. He's not afraid of your failure. He's not ashamed to be associated with you. He's just waiting for your voice to rise again. Your story isn't over. Your strength can return. Your purpose is not canceled. The enemy's goal was to bind you, blind you, mock you, and make you believe God left you. But when you cry out, even at your lowest, He answers. He brings power in surrender. He brings redemption in ruins. He brings victory even in death. Samson teaches us that unhealed wounds become open doors. That strength without surrender leads to defeat. That charisma can carry you where character cannot keep you. That even when you're anointed, you are still accountable. That your calling doesn't cancel your need for discernment. That confusing identity with assignment will wear you out. That people-pleasing will leave you vulnerable for enemy manipulation. That staying around people who secretly hope you fall will eventually drain your strength. That just because you're strong doesn't mean you shouldn't walk away. That when God set you apart, it's dangerous to keep going back to where He pulled you from. Samson didn't lose his strength all at once. He gave it away piece by piece. He ignored red flags. He stayed when he should have walked. He pleased people who never had his best interests at heart. And he forgot who he was until it was almost too late. But here's the mercy. Even in the prison, even in the humiliation, even with his eyes gone, God was not finished. Maybe you felt like Samson. Maybe you ignored the warnings, opened the wrong doors, trusted the wrong people, or even touched things that God told you not to. Maybe you felt shamed, mocked, or disqualified. But listen closely. The enemy may have cut your hair, but he can't cancel your calling. Your strength is not gone, just buried beneath surrender. God restored Samson's strength the moment he cried out from a pure place, not out of pride, but humility. He asked for one more chance, and God answered. The same grace is available to you even now. God's not done, so lift your head. Your story isn't over. And like Samson, your greatest victory may come after your biggest mistake.